He did say it.
When all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a culture war. So you got a political faction that really doesn't have a lot of answers for many of the questions that people are wrestling with. They love talking about gas prices, but they don't have an answer on gas prices. They don't have an answer on inflation. Many of them answered our call for bipartisan infrastructure work with a no. Haven't seen an answer on what to do about the price of prescription drugs. They voted against lowering that. Don't have an answer on what to do about the cost of childcare. Don't have a great answer on taxes. Actually want to raise taxes for the poor. That's a new one. I thought I'd seen it all. Then I saw Senator Scott's proposal to raise taxes for the poor. That's not great territory for them to be debating on. So what do? They find somebody vulnerable and pick on them, which at the moment is largely the trans community. And they find something to talk about which can go between the laughable, like is Donald Duck going to make your kid gay, to the incredibly dark, which is the suggestion that the very presence of someone who is gender nonconforming, or trans, or gay, or lesbian, or otherwise different, that the very existence of somebody like that is an adult subject. Right? That if my kids in, let's say, first grade classroom were to mention in passing that over the weekend they had a great time going with their dads to the zoo, that they would have somehow, by saying that, uttered something age inappropriate and get us really fired up about that fight. And it's just politics. It's motivated by just politics. So I guess what I'm saying is we're seeing a lot of overlapping patterns that are all pointing in the direction that the worst tendencies in human politics always have, which is to take rights and freedoms away, and to make it harder for vulnerable people in the service of some imagined political gain. And there are two answers to that kind of thing. Two kinds of answers, I would argue. One answer is to argue against it and fight against it, which is what I do. And people who are involved in politics and public life go on television and do. And the other is to see to it that is in fact not a way to gain power politically. Because of course the biggest test of any of these tactics isn't were they well argued, were they convincing. The biggest test of these tactics is did they work? And I'm going to be careful saying anything more about that because I'm here in my capacity as a federal official and I'm not here to talk about campaigns. But I will say just as a matter of policy, and as a matter of the kind of political maneuvering that takes place among officials, certainly in Washington. Ultimately, if things that hurt people help you get more power, people will continue to do them. And the rest is up to us.
6 have been accused of spousal abuse. 7 have been arrested for fraud. 19 have been accused of writing bad checks. 117 have directly or indirectly been bankrupted of at least 2 businesses. 3 have done time for assault. 71, repeat 71, cannot get a credit card due to their bad credit. 14 have been arrested on drug-related charges. 8 have been arrested for shoplifting. 21 currently are defendants in lawsuits. 84 have been arrested for drunk driving in the last year. How many of you think NBA? How many of you think NFL? Well, the answer is neither. It's the 435 members of the United States Congress.
Particularly right-wing news sources, and it is causing us to not really focus on the issues that are going to keep our kids safe.
Here's a question. Let's say that we're 20 years into the future, we have brain transplant surgery. Let's say that I take your Rob's brain and I put it into a cis woman's body. Let's say that you wake up and you're like, this feels really wrong. I feel like a man and now I'm in a woman's body. Would you say that that's a disorder? That you have a disorder there?
I'd say I have a disorder, an illness, or something that's wrong physiologically or mentally with my body, yes.
What is the disorder?
The disorder is that my brain is in the wrong body.
Okay, so what is the solution for that?
Put my brain in a body that more aligns with what my brain is.
Okay, you just stated exactly. Okay, I love you. You are the most trans-positive conservative I've ever argued with. So that is exactly the position that trans people take. Is what you should do is you need to make the body match what the brain says. So that's why we have things like hormone replacement therapy, sex reassignment surgery. It's to make the body match what the brain is experiencing. So what you just said is that exactly.
Okay.
Vertical morality is when you view the world as a hierarchy. So you are here and your authority figure or God is here. And they set forth a set of rules, and that is the morals and ethics that you are supposed to live by. And you abide by those rules based off of some system of rewards and punishments. But in a horizontal framework, you view the world in a horizontal structure. And so you get your morals by observing whether or not your actions and the actions of others positively or negatively affect those in this horizontal plane, so like other humans. And so you are mostly motivated by the positive and negative effects experienced by those around you. And if it's a positive or negative effect, that's how you decide whether it's an ethical or moral way to act. Where if you work in this vertical structure, you are more motivated by the positive or negative effects experienced by you as an individual and whether or not you are going to be rewarded or punished for your actions. And if you view the world in a vertical structure and you are able to visualize someone being above you, then it's also more easy for you to visualize people being below you and worthy of less than you. Where if you operate from this horizontal framework and you decide what is ethical and moral based off of the positive and negative effects experienced by those around you, then you're also more easily able to see everyone as equal, and you're going to be more of an advocate for equity.
I've been with my husband for almost 28 years. We were allowed to get married just 5 years ago, and for 27 of those years, we've been raising children. We have 3 children. My oldest came to us when he was not quite 3 years old. He had been barely eating solid foods. He was sleeping in a drawer. He was living in squalor in one of the toughest neighborhoods in New York City. His parents were heroin addicts. They had 4 children. I think they loved their children. I know they loved drugs more. And they were unable to take care of them. And we didn't set out to be parents. This wasn't about fulfilling some desire we had. It was because someone asked us if we could help. And we said we would. And soon after that, his mom OD'd, and there was no one to bury her. So we did. And his dad went to jail, and there was no one to take care of his little boy. So we did. And it was the greatest thing that ever happened to us. We've been together for 4 months as a couple. That young man is 30 years old today. And I think you asked him, Representative Heiss, about the family he was raised in. Well, let's just say I'd go with what he has to say about the ability of LGBT couples to parent and foster. And you know, it was a few years later that an adoption agency called us from Texas, sir. And the reason they were calling us in New York was not because we were seeking to adopt. It was because they had learned in the 1990s that there were certain types of kids who were not going to be adopted, where the circumstances of their birth, through no fault of their own, obviously, was difficult or confronting for traditional adopted parents. And what these adoption agencies learned, to their credit, was that there were LGBT couples in cities like New York who would say yes to these children. Not as an alternative to the straight couple that was supposed to, as an alternative to never being adopted, because no one was going to adopt these kids. And it was that insight that LGBT couples were willing to cross lines of difference because they had experienced doing so in their own lives, that they had less preoccupation or hysteria with things like HIV, that they were more willing to adopt across lines of difference like race or religion, that there was an opportunity for kids that would not have a home to have a home. And so it is because of that that on January 10th, 2001, I learned of my oldest daughter, who had been born just 5 days earlier. We had no intention of adopting, that she had been born in Texas to a United States military member, to the granddaughter of the United States military. Her mom was 14 years old. She didn't even know she was pregnant. She played basketball and complained of cramps and delivered the baby when the doctors thought she had appendicitis. And they called us because no one else was going to do it. And so 13 days later, my partner and I were standing in front of a Texas judge at 8 o'clock in the morning before his docket started. And he said, "Are you fellas going to raise this child?" And we said, "Yes, sir." And he finalized the adoption on the spot. No rescission rights. 13 days after that child was born, she was home in New York with 2 loving parents. And that child is 19 years old today and a freshman at John Jay College in New York. She's a beautiful young woman. And she would not have had mom and dad. So you keep having them, and we'll keep raising them. The way we go. Did she deserve a mom and a dad? Yes, she did. But she also deserved people who loved her, who were going to raise her. And that is what is at stake today. Our third child, the adoption agency, same one, 2 years later, came to us, same story. Very simple. They sought out LGBTQ parents because they knew they would adopt when others wouldn't. So the point is when you allow people to discriminate against those couples, you deprive children of good moms, dads, families who are going to love them. And when you dress it up as religious liberty, you simply sanction discrimination and deprive those children of a home that they deserve.